Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
The New York Yankees are seemingly in a free fall. What has happened to the Bronx Bombers? Also, the Cleveland Guardians are looking like legit World Series contenders. And when it comes to Super Bowl contention, the Dallas Cowboys aren't in the first tier or the second.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
Well, following a tough series loss to the Boston Red Sox, the New York Yankees just don't feel like the team that many expected them to be when the MLB season got underway. Here to help us break it all down and we could potentially save the Yankees season is Brian McKeon from the Locked On Yankees podcast. Brian, to kick us off here, let's start with what the expectations around the Yankees were and where they are now. Kind of what has happened to this Yankees team who were an early World Series competitor, or at least in those conversations.
Yeah, I think going into the season, everyone was a little hesitant, right? I mean, the Garrett Cole injury right out of the gate, Aaron Judge got hurt in spring training, and you didn't know what to think. And then they came into the year, and it was a slugfest. Yeah, Giancarlo Stanton hitting well. Juan Soto impressed in the first series of the year. The pitching staff was on record tracking, and all of a sudden, at some point, circa June 1st, it disappeared. And everything changed. The pitching staff stopped pitching. The bullpen stopped being great. And the offense just disappeared. And now you've got a team that from the 4-hitter down is an automatic out. They're seriously struggling. They're seriously reeling. And people were afraid to call this shades of 2022 and shades of 2020 when they started really struggling and falling apart. But we've gotten to the point now where you seriously have to start thinking about this team falling apart.
Yeah, so when you're taking a look at maybe where this team is heading next, do you feel like this is a team that could potentially save itself, still be in that division conversation, or is this more so a team that you're now looking at as maybe a wild card team at best?
No, this is a team that better go save itself.
There you go.
You trade for Juan Soto, you make a move like that and you want to keep him, you better make a commitment to go out there and win a World Series. You have Garrett Cole at $38 million a year, Aaron Judge at 40 plus, Juan Soto is going to be at 50 plus if you bring him back. You've got a lot of guys with a lot of payroll, and you can't afford to go out there and not try to win the World Series, especially with how the AL looks this year, right? The AL is wide open, and the Astros aren't necessarily the Astros that they've been in the last few years. Right. There's still a chance to win. A team with Garrett Cole and Aaron Judge and Juan Soto in the middle of their lineup is a team that's going to be feared no matter what point of the season you're in, no matter how they're playing at any point. Do they have to make some moves? Absolutely. But to act like the season's over at this point, you have to go for it. You have no option.
Yeah, there you go. So now when you talk about the pieces that they have and potentially still making some moves, what are some of the things that the Yankees might be able to do at the trade deadline to help fix where the season is currently headed?
First, I'd empty anyone in the farm for Mason Miller. And I think with the kind of season that he's had and on a rookie contract, making no money, already through a Tommy John surgery, that's a guy that you got to go out there and get. He's been that impressive. And I don't view Clay Holmes as a number one everyday closer. I've been saying it for weeks on the Locked On Yankee podcast. He doesn't have that, that thing. And that most closers, you can't really describe it, but it's there. They don't seem to be able to have a closer right now that you have confidence in going into the ninth inning, right? And in a playoff game, I've said this to Yankee fans all the time. In a playoff game, if it's going into the ninth inning and it's a one-run game, do you trust Clay Holmes? And the answer resoundingly is going to be no. You don't. So you have to go out there and get an elite arm. I can't help but argue, I don't know about you, the lineup has to be good. The lineup is not as bad as it is right now. It might not be as good as it was in April, but it's certainly not as bad as it is right now. So it's probably somewhere in the middle, which is about 4.5, 5 runs a game, which is a really good baseball team. And if this pitching staff can figure things out, what gives you the clue that they can't, right? You have Garrett Cole, the reigning Cy Young winner. You have Marcus Stroman, who is a professional, and Carlos Rodon, who's been a Cy Young finalist multiple times in his career. Those are 3 guys that can catch their wings again. And if this team can start to hit again and rampify the bullpen, I don't see why they can't sneak into a playoff spot, and I don't see why they can't push for a title.
Yeah, it feels very much like the talent is absolutely there. As you mentioned, it wasn't really until I'll borrow your phrase, circa June 1, that we really started to see this team start to sink down. So now we get to the age-old question of who's to blame. And I know a lot of the conversation has been around either Aaron Boone and then, of course, Brian Cashman. Where do you look at placing maybe some of the blame on where the trajectory of this Yankees season has gone, and why has that been the case?
If they keep going the way in the direction they're going, they'll probably go classic Yankees and fire a hitting coach you never heard of. But
right.
The move to make is to fire Aaron Boone. And this has been season after season after season. And if you want to get a jolt, listen, there's not many guys out there right now that they can really go pick up and it'll change the trajectory of this team. There just isn't much out there. There's a couple of relievers, but when it comes to actual hitters and pitchers, there's not a lot out there. Firing a manager creates a jolt in a team. I'm looking for two things post All-Star break from this team. I don't want the manager in the same spot. And I think if they lose to the Rays and the Orioles, which they very much could, I don't know how you do go forward with the manager. And I want the captain, Aaron Judge, to speak up more. It was all cute and fun when Aaron Judge was not the captain and he was playing as well as he was, and he was the center of this team. Loved it, right? But now he's the captain, and now he's got that marker. You want that title attached to you? You got to come out publicly and say some stuff and get this team to jolt themselves up, because they're not as bad as they're playing right now. They may not be as good as they were in April, but they're not this bad right now. So you have to kind of try and find that medium and pick yourself up off your feet starting in the end of the All-Star break in July.
Stay up to date all year long on the New York Yankees by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Yankees on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. Coming up next, the Cleveland Guardians are one of the best teams in baseball. No, seriously. But before we get to why, we'll take a look at Paul George, who has some poignant words for the Los Angeles Clippers. No football, no NBA, no problem with FanDuel. With baseball, WNBA, and soon the Olympics, there's plenty to dive into over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Bad baseball is usually the best way to make money over at FanDuel, and we've got a beautifully bad game for you today to put together a parlay. The Cincinnati Reds are facing the Colorado Rockies, and Red shortstop Elly De La Cruz is on fire. If you put together a 3-leg parlay of De La Cruz getting 1 or more steals, De La Cruz scoring 1 or more runs, and De La Cruz getting 2 or more total bases, you could see a payout of 4-1 or more. And all 3 legs of that parlay could conceivably happen in just one at bat. Plus, FanDuel loves giving you boosts for same game parlays, so the payouts could be even larger. So what are you waiting for? Head over to FanDuel.com to start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. If you're catching this episode after checking out your favorite Locked On podcast, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. George was not happy with the Los Angeles Clippers' offer to keep him around. Now, he did sign with the Philadelphia 76ers on a max free agent deal, so it all worked out for him. But that didn't stop him from shedding a little light on the Clippers' initial offer, which he saw as disrespectful. On his podcast, George said that the Clippers' offer was something, quote, like 2 years, $60 million. And that offer really stunned him. George said that he had intended to stay in Los Angeles until the end of his career, but that offer made him reconsider his stance. George said of his reaction to the offer, quote, "That's crazy. I'm like, no, I'm not signing that." It certainly will be interesting now to see if George has a little bit more jump in his shot when the Sixers take on the Clippers next year. On the diamond, the Minnesota Twins began a series with the Chicago White Sox.
Okay, man, game 1 versus Chicago. Back on the road now for 6 straight before the All-Star break next Monday. Got Chris Paddock on the mound after a few weeks of rest. First inning, Trevor Larnach with the solo shot, his 9th of the year, by the way. That makes it 26 straight games the Twins have homered in. 4th inning, Buxton doubles to left. Kepler scores. That makes it 2-1. Bottom 6, wheels fall off a little bit. Paddock starts off the inning. He gets pulled. Okert and Stallmount try to clean up the mess a little bit, so to speak. Chicago ends up scoring 3 runs. That makes it 5-2. Twins, though, they come right back. Very next inning, top 7, Brooks Lee, another RBI base hit. Buxton scores on that one. Then Matt Wallner and Carlos Correa both go deep. That makes it 6-5. White Sox, though, they come back now. A couple base hits off Griffin Jack, something we don't really say a lot on this show. So to extras we go. Another nail biter on our hands. Remember Vasquez with the walk-off winner yesterday. 11th inning, Brooks Lee with the go-ahead RBI single. Margot knocks in an insurance run. That makes it 8-6. Thunderbird comes in, closes up shop. The Twins win. Check this out. Their 8th game in a row versus the White Sox. They're now 4-3 in extra inning games this year.
Well, it might have been a disappointing loss on Monday to the Detroit Lions, but that is far from the story when it comes to the Cleveland Guardians, who have been absolutely outstanding so far this season. And here to help break it all down is Justin Latta. So, Justin, when it comes down to the Guardians, as you cover over at Locked On Guardians every single Monday through Friday, I get the feeling that this Tigers loss isn't a reason to hit the panic button for Guardians fans.
Not at all. Thanks for having me on, Ross. And it's not a reason at all. I mean, it was a bad offensive performance for the Guardians, obviously. No, you only got 5 base runners in the whole game, or 4 base runners. But every time this team has hit any sort of rough patch in the road, they haven't been long patches. They've always done a good job recovering, and it's just one of those nights.
Yeah. So when you look at where the Guardians have really been sitting, over 50 wins already, just over 30 losses, they've been outstanding out there. What has been the thing, maybe the most surprising thing, maybe the most tone-setting thing that has really set the tone for what the Guardians have been able to achieve so far this season?
It's a turnaround of their offense. This is a team that was last in the MLB in home runs a year ago. They are now 10th in the league, or tied for 10th in the league in home runs. And a lot of it is coming from Stephen Kwan, who's making his first All-Star appearance. Not a home run hitter, but is up there in OPS with terms of Aaron Judge and Juan Soto, which is not guys you would expect. And they've got unexpected All-Stars like David Fry, who had a great month of April and May. It's kind of slowed down here in June, which has been a kind of a problem. But they've gone all up the boards in home runs. So their offense has been a big turnaround. And then their bullpen has carried them for a starting pitching unit that has been really one of the most mediocre, if not bottom 10 in baseball, which is a total reverse for a franchise that really relies on their starting pitching more years than not.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned some of those All-Stars, 5 total All-Stars for this Guardians team. What does that say about the talent that this team now has?
Yeah, I mean, Kwan was definitely not a guy you pointed to coming into the season that was going to be an All-Star. Certainly not David Fry. Josh Naylor, it looked like he got snubbed a year ago, and Jose Ramirez is Jose Ramirez. And Clase is having another terrific year. But I think it's a lot of respect, too, because, Jose Ramirez got voted in. Stephen Kwan got voted in, even though we don't really value batting average the way we used to in baseball back in the day. When you're hitting 360, people take notice, and they've got 3 reserves, which that comes from managers, coaches, and players. When you've got those guys being voted in by their peers, that says a lot of respect, and they're getting rewarded for having one of the best records in the American League, and I think at this time still a top 3 record in baseball.
Yeah, so a very talented team, no doubt. But with the MLB trade deadline on the way, could you see the Guardians still looking to add more talent, or at least make some moves with the trade deadline to continue this trajectory?
Yeah, their front office knows that starting pitching is a giant issue for them right now. Again, Gavin Williams just came back off the injured list. Tanner Bybee has been good, but they only had 2 starts out of their ace, Shane Bieber, before he went down for the year with Tommy John. It's been a really bad unit all year. And it's going to be very hard for this team to do much in the postseason. As good as their bullpen is, you do need some starters, some innings from the starters. You really need innings from the starters just to carry you the rest of the way in the season. The way they've gone, it's been a struggle. So the front office is very aware of their starting pitching struggles. They have to go out and do something. They could use another bat somewhere in the lineup as well, and it wouldn't be the worst idea for them to add another reliever too, as they've taxed their bullpen very heavily all season long.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, look, Locked On Guardians, of course, is the go-to place for Guardians coverage, but you all do a fantastic job covering the MLB draft over there as well. How big could this draft be for the Guardians as well? And how do you kind of position the idea of trying to add talent, knowing that it's right smack dab in the middle of the season? I think a lot of us look at the MLB draft as a later thing. So what could the Guardians get done during the draft to maybe help themselves out?
Well, it's the first time the team's ever picked first in its franchise history. They've had a lot of bad years in the 70s and 80s. never picked number 1 overall before. It's not the best draft in recent history in terms of talent, but they have the most money to spend of all the teams in the draft, which is going to help them out a lot. And they really want to collect a lot of talent. And what it really does for them is obviously you're not drafting for immediate need, but what they could do is really come through and add a lot of talent to the system. And it could soften the blow for what they might do at the trading deadline. Their system right now, in terms of prospects, is a little bit average. It's not as good as strong as it has been, but it's okay. And whatever prospects they might go ahead and trade at the trading deadline to add a major league piece, when you have the first overall pick and you have a ton of money to spend in the draft, you can add a lot to your farm system and make those trades. And it's a lot easier to swallow to trade those prospects because you have the draft right there in front of the trading deadline.
Stay up to date all year long on the Cleveland Guardians by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Guardians on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, the Dallas Cowboys are not top-tier contenders. The Dallas Cowboys had a good year last year. They have Micah Parsons anchoring their defense, Dak Prescott leading their offense. However, that's not enough to impress Tyler Rowland of Locked On NFL, as he explains to Lauren Cox.
I have Dallas in tier 3 by themselves because I don't think that they're on the level of the 3 that I mentioned, Green Bay, Philly, and LA, who I like a lot this year, and I like better than Dallas. But Dallas is a step above the other tier 4 option. So my tier 4 is Tampa Bay, Atlanta, Seattle, and Chicago. I'm high on your local Bears there. I think they're going to be pretty good this year, or at least decent, So I think Dallas is better than all those teams. I don't want to lump them in there, but I just can't believe in Dallas enough to put them in the Green Bay, Philly, and Los Angeles Rams.
I got to agree with Tyler here, especially when you look at the other teams that are atop the contention list over in the NFC. Of course, San Francisco 49ers are a top tier contender. And then I agree. I can't really put Dallas in the same conversation as Green Bay and their young core that has been really, really exciting and impressive. The Philadelphia Eagles, I might actually bump the Philadelphia Eagles back to tier 3 as well. And then, of course, the Los Angeles Rams, we have Sean McVay leading the way. For me, when it comes to the Philadelphia Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys, I think that they proved more about who they were with the disastrous way that their seasons ended than the impressive ways that their seasons began. And especially with the Dallas Cowboys, who had their opportunity to move on from mediocrity by moving on from Mike McCarthy years ago when Sean Payton was available. They didn't take their chance to do that. And so have they signed up for anything more than playoff disappointment at this point? I can't say that they have signed up for any more than just that. Leave alone the fact that they lost a future Hall of Fame left tackle and Tyron Smith this offseason. Tyler Biadasz, their starting center, who is also excellent. He's also gone. So now you're having to move things over to a pair of talented rookies in Oklahoma's offensive tackle, Tyler Guyton, who's set to step in for Smith, and then Cooper Beebe, who might step in out of Kansas State at center, out of position for Tyler Biadasz. But can you really rely on a couple of rookies to keep things together on your offensive line ahead of Dak Prescott? I just can't see it all coming together for Dallas here in 2024, which is really a shame because that Micah Parsons-led defense can be really, really good. And maybe that's the thing that keeps them in that playoff contention, keeps them in the NFC East conversation. But when we're talking about Super Bowl contenders in the NFL, I just don't look at Dallas Cowboys as that version of America's team anymore. The Georgia Bulldogs offensive line just got a lot taller on Monday. Head coach Kirby Smart lands a commitment from a former top basketball recruit for this year. Tackle Jazair Jackson stands at 6'11", and not too long ago, he was in the NBA draft process. But now Big Ja will join the Bulldogs offensive line that's already one of the best in the game. Now they've added one of the tallest in the game. Good luck to opposing defenses. If you're catching this episode after checking out your favorite Locked On show, don't forget to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or your favorite podcast app so you never miss the latest episodes. And if you're new to Locked On Sports Today, we're here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports Today, we begin to answer the question, who is the most irrelevant team in sports? Oh, I can't wait until tomorrow. So at least until tomorrow, stay Locked On Sports Today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
For more episodes of Locked On Sports Today, go to our video on demand. Click on Sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.